preparing for the live Zoom audience. And awesome. Well, thank you so much for everyone who showed up early. We're a little bit late for those who are joining via the live stream. Oh wait, and let me actually, I have the music on. Let me turn that off. Awesome. So we are now on live stream. Welcome everyone. Today's Let's Talk is on how to advance at work and manage your power, overcome exclusion, and succeed in work with the amazing Francine Parham. For those who are in the live Zoom audience, love seeing your beautiful faces. If you feel comfortable, turn on your cameras because I know for me as a speaker, it helps me seeing your beautiful faces. And if you want to turn it off, that's fine as well. I know it's 5 o'clock, so some of you guys might be in your sweatpants right now. For those of who are new to Community of Seven, there's one singular purpose of these Let's Talk calls, and it's to create an environment where participants can feel safe, support each other, and really help encourage us in this journey in life and in work. Um, and more than ever, I've been like looking at all of these statistics on the loneliness epidemic, and yeah, it just makes me really sad. And I think that's why if we can be there for each other, how powerful is that, right? And I love this kind of community we built on LinkedIn and on Facebook and all of these other YouTube and all of the different sites where like I read the comments on Community of Seven in my post, and I just love to see how all of you support each other. It just really warms my heart. Um, and so for the next activity, before we begin and before I introduce Francine, I'm not going to have the Zoom audience turn on their cameras only because these are kind of some sensitive questions. So I just want you to answer yes or no. For those who are watching this via live stream on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, X, etc., I want you to answer in the comments yes or no. And for those in the live Zoom audience, do the same in chat. And I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and you could just type in yes or no. First question, how many of you have ever felt excluded at work at any point of your career? How many of you have ever felt excluded in your work? And you could just type that in the chat and then just press send. Okay, I am seeing a lot of yeses. All yeses. Yes, yes, yeah. I think a lot of us can relate to that. And even on the LinkedIn live stream, I'm seeing a lot of yeses as well. How many of you have ever, and this could be at any point of your career, not just where you work now, how many have ever worked at a company where it felt like the Hunger Games? And we have a global audience. So, for folks who are watching this in Africa or Europe or Asia, you might not get this reference. But in the movie Hunger Games, this government body basically has these kids fighting each other to death. And whoever is the one to kill the most people survives, basically gets elevated, right? So it's yes. Dr. Avila says it much better than I. Everyone is out for themselves. It's a tough place to be. Yes, thank you. So I see a lot of yes with that too, right? Number 3, how many of you have ever struggled to figure out the power dynamics at work and never really understood how to advance? Yes or no? Lots of yes. I actually haven't seen any no's so far. Um, this is kind of frightening, but not surprised. Last question. How many of you feel that advancement at work is not always equitable? Meaning it might not be equitable if you are a certain gender, a certain race, a certain socioeconomic, whatever it may be. And here's the thing. You could be a white male and it cannot be socially equitable because you might be working where it's predominantly female and only females get promoted, right? So when you talk about equality, you could be a white male and not feel equitable, right? So I'm seeing a lot of yeses. Thank you so much for your honest, really, kind of feedback. I know for me, oh, also, well, as I kind of speak, I'd love to kind of, this is a community. So I want you to feel comfortable sharing in the comments. So first, introduce yourselves, your name, what city you're coming from. We have a global audience on LinkedIn and all of the different platforms. Tell us what city you're dialing in from. Introduce yourself because we're really trying to create community in these talks. So this talk is on how to advance in work. How do you manage power, overcome exclusion, and succeed at work with Francine? Um, I connected with Francine last week. So this is, we literally pulled together this talk in 1 week. But Elaine Lynn Herring, who's the author of Unlearning Silence, and she was a guest for one of our micro learnings probably about 2 months ago. She said, she connected with me with Francine. We got on a call. It was supposed to be 30 minutes, but it ended up being an hour. And we had this amazing conversation. You know, we were supposed to talk about her conference, but we ended up just talking about our our experiences, like basically moving up the corporate ladder. Her at GE and all these big companies, me kind of working in advertising and marketing, how we were usually the one, the one of the only at the table of color. She was one of the few African American. I was one of the few Asian Americans that had kind of executive roles at the companies we worked with. And, we talked about her book. And what we really discovered, even though she wrote her book kind of as a lens coming as a very senior executive at these Fortune, 100 companies, um, I think what was really powerful is that we had this kind of shared experience, right? Even though we came from two different backgrounds, we, you know, um, came from two different kind of experiences. We had that kind of commonality. And we talked a lot about the power dynamics within a lot of companies where we felt like our voices weren't heard. And when we were in positions of power, how we tried to elevate the voices of others that were excluded, and how we sometimes got slapped on the hands, or we might have even been let go of our jobs or been reprimanded for speaking out for those who might not have voices within their organizations. So I really wanted to have Francine come and talk about her book. Her book is really powerful. It's entitled "Please Sit Over There: How to Manage Power, Overcome Exclusion, and Succeed as a Black Woman at Work." Though I will say her book is universal. You don't have to be a Black woman to be excluded in corporate America, though that experience is very unique as well. But go out and buy it. It's you can buy it on Amazon, you could buy it on Barnes and Noble, anywhere books are sold. And make sure after you read it, because it's gonna your mind is gonna be blown. I want you to also make sure that you add a review because that's how we hug our authors, right? So let me kind of bring on uh, Spotlight. Hi, Francine. So as I introduce Francine, um, Francine Parham is a career expert focused on female leadership and the advancement of women and women of color into positions of leadership and authority in the workplace. She is a human capital expert and practitioner. She spent over 2 decades in the corporate sector, advancing the positions, in such lofty titles as global vice president in two Fortune 500 companies, General Electric and Johnson and Johnson. She understands the importance of having the right skills for career success. In terms of her experiences, being one of the few Black women at her level resulted in her becoming the founder and CEO of her own business, Francine Parham and Company. Her company works with organizations to provide quantitative and qualitative assessments with recommended approaches and solutions to advancing professional women and women of color. And she has this, is the creator of the Sharpen Your Skills for professionals. And she's also a creator of the newly launched media channel, which I'm so excited to take apart and watch when it does come out, is Advancing Women in the Workplace, which really focuses on democratizing career development and advancing all professional women and women of color. And her book, as I mentioned, Please Sit Over There, How to Manage Power, Overcome Exclusion, and Succeed as a Black Woman, is out now. So please purchase it right now. She has a master's degree at Columbia University and a master's of science, not just one, but two, journalism as a stable investigative fellow. She also has a second degree, not just one, two, three, at University of Illinois, where she obtained her Master's of Arts in Labor and Industrial Relations. So round of applause. Woo! Welcome, Francine. I forgot my buzzer somewhere. It's somewhere here. Hi, Francine. So glad to have you here. And also, we're going to be talking about your conference too, because side note, the way I got connected with Francine is you see the sign behind her. She has a conference coming up in 2 weeks called The Business Behind the Book. And whoo, the stories I could tell you about the publishing industry. So Francine created this conference that's going to be taking place in New York in 2 weeks. And for those who are watching this right now, you can get a discount to the conference. So she'll talk more about it at the end. But first, for you, Fran, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Oh, and I think you might be on
Let
mute.
me unmute myself. There we go. All right. Thank you so much, Lan. And I'm so happy to see everyone here today. I am, as Lan shared with everyone earlier, we just a half an hour turned into an hour and a half, almost 2 hours. And we finally said, we got to get off the phone here or get off we were on a Zoom call, I
Yeah.
remember, Lan.
It
I'm
was
like, oh,
only
we got
because
to go.
the only
Yeah,
reason why we got off is because I actually had another call that I couldn't cancel. That was the only we
exactly.
probably could have talked for longer.
Exactly. So I'm just, when Lan told me about the community here and all the work that she does along with each and every one of you, I'm like, wait a minute, how can I be a part of this and what can I do? Because I live the life of, always seeking to help others. And I just don't say that, just to say, oh, I help people. I truly believe in rolling up my sleeves, and irrespective of who you are, whether you're a woman, whether whomever you identify yourself with, I am always there, and I will do whatever I can to leverage my capital or my network or my connections or whatever that may be, to help. And if you're, focused on advancing, then I'm focused on advancing. So, thank you, Lan, once again for having me to this group and to share and answer any questions that you may have.
I love that. So, Francine, could you share kind of a personal story about a time when you successfully navigated a challenging power dynamic at work? Like what kind of key strategies did you use?
Mhm.
Because for you to
Sure.
elevate to the positions you did, VP
Mhm.
in these Fortune really 50 companies, um, would be difficult for anyone, male or female, right? But let alone like being an African American woman. Like, how did you kind of, we talked, in the beginning, I kind of talked about this whole, asked the group about environments where they felt it was hostile. And, like, how did you kind of navigate these power dynamics at work?
Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, as you mentioned, Lan, the book that Please Sit Over There, as you stated, the stories and the conversations, when people read them, they're like, oh, that happened to me. I mean, it's universal. What I did was I wrote this book from my lens. And so it's from my lens being a Black woman having to navigate through corporate America. I knew that I was talking about universal topics, whether I'm talking about sponsorship, organizational advocacy, whether I'm talking, irrespective of, that person who is the individual who, bullies you at work. All of us have had that happen to us. I just wanted to write it from my lens because I felt that I needed to be authentic. and I needed to position it from my view. And it doesn't mean that my view is not the same view as someone else's, but I wanted to honor the fact. And I just didn't want to say, well, this happens to everyone, because many of you know so many books, if you read them, are written by people who don't look like Lan and myself, especially in the business world. And so a lot of the advice that they're giving is not advice that I can use. And listen, I've had 2 decades of books that told me do this, do that, and it didn't necessarily work for me because I didn't look like that majority person. And so that's why I decided that I really needed to speak my voice and share. And so, Lan, to your point, my book is all about scenarios that I describe. And I'll give one, the first one I talk about, which is actually the title of my book, called Please Sit Over There. So Please Sit Over There has significance because if let's just take a step back and say, what is power, right? So let's anchor everybody in terms of the definition of power. And power is simply one's ability to influence, right? So you could influence for good, or you could influence for bad, or you could influence anywhere on this, the scale of being able to influence someone in some environment. And all of the work that I'm talking about around this book is my experiences working in the corporate environment. So one story that I'll give you, Lan, came when I was I was told to please sit over there. And so I came in, it was the biggest job I've ever had in my career. And I was promoted to a global vice president. And I reported into the very most senior leader of that business. And I remember, getting the announcement, and people from all over the world congratulated me, because people I didn't even know were sending me these emails. And so I was super excited. So, I planned my first day, coming in, because I was meeting some very, very senior leaders. They had an orientation for me planned. And so I wanted to like be on top, I wanted to be on my game. And I was headed into a very remote location called Warsaw, Indiana. And so, people will say, well, Warsaw, Indiana is right outside of like Chicago. No, it's not outside of Chicago. It's about 2.5 hours east of Chicago. But anyway, I went to this remote place where people obviously had experienced me, had not experienced me, in a very insular community. And so I went in and I had practiced and all that good stuff. Well, my first day, I walk in the door, I've got and I talk about this in the book. I've got my business suit on, because back in the day, that's what you wore, and you really planned, you thought about what you were going to say. And I really wanted to have an impact. So I walked in and I walked to the front desk and I said, hello, my name is Francine Parham. And before I got out I'm your new, the person did not even look at me. And she said to me, she said, please sit over there. She said, go, just sit over there. Please sit over there for me. And I was like, wow, you didn't even give me a chance to like say, I'm Francine Parham. I am your new vice president of X, Y, and Z. So I rehearsed all this stuff, guys, because I wanted to have I wanted to have the right impression, right? And she told me to sit over there. So like I paused for a second because she didn't look at me when she told me this. That's how like of a distraction I must have been for her. And so I took a step back and I thought about it, and I paused and I said, excuse me. I waited for a second. I said, excuse me. I just need you to, I'm so sorry that I'm interrupting you. And I know that you're extremely busy, but I'm Francine Parham, and I'm your new global vice president of human resources. How are you? It's so nice to meet you. And may I ask who you are? And as soon as I said that, her face like dropped. I'm like, and she's like, oh my gosh. Oh, and I'm like, yes. I am Francine that report, I said I report into, and I pointed over to the to the elevator and upstairs, and I said, I report to the president, like I'm right next door to him. The office right next door to him that's empty, that's my office. And she was like, oh my God, what can I do? What can I do? And I said, no, no, no. I said, don't get up. I said, it's okay. It's all right. Just point me into the right direction. Tell me where I need to go. I share that with you because, and I'm giving you like a clip of it, because at the end of the day, I had learned to think on my feet, and I had learned how to respond to individuals, because it wasn't a matter of me getting like upset. And I often tell people sometimes there needs to be, I call it the clutch between your brain and your mouth, because the clutch if I had released my clutch, I would have probably said some pretty like bad things to her. But that was a huge clutch because I'm like, I've never been dismissed in my life before like that, you know? And it had nothing to do with her level, but it did have something to do with her level because she had dismissed me. She was an administrator at the front desk. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to pull the power play on you, but I'm going to do it in a nice way. And so, what I learned, I had practiced through my career was understanding when to speak up and when not to speak up. And when you're thinking about speaking up, thinking about what you're going to say. So all of that happened in a split second, but I promise you that was like 20 years worth at the time, maybe 15, about 15 years worth of experience of knowing when to weigh in and when not to weigh in, and knowing that you don't always have to be the first person that speaks up, but what you have to say when you do speak up needs to be powerful. So I clearly did the power play on her. I clearly, said, "Hey, no, no problem." But she understood. She clearly understood that I wasn't happy.
But you
I
did
know,
it respectfully.
but I did it very respectfully.
Yeah.
And that's the key. You can tell someone, and I joke, I say, you can tell someone, and I'll say, kiss your rear end. I say something else when I'm talking to my friends, but you can tell someone to kiss your rear end like 50,000 different ways, all the way from, it's okay to kiss my rear end, right? And so I chose to be very pointed to her. And in my mind, I said, you know what? I got you. Right. I know you. I know who you are. I know what you stand for. And I'm going to remember that. And I got you too. Right. So we
Mhm.
have this, we got this, we have not, we're not going to talk here, but I know that, I know that that I know who you are. Okay. And I understand that you're a dismissive person, right? So I could have really said, do you understand? You don't know who I am. I'm Francine. I could have done all that, but it wasn't, it was like, I'm going to kill her with a little kindness here because we're going to have a conversation later on. Like, she actually works for me, not the other way around. I
Yeah.
later found out.
So,
So, mhm,
so question. I think when you have power, it's kind of easy to kind of um level up the playing field because you come
mhm,
from a place of power. But what if you're kind of first starting off in your career and something like that happens? Like how would you advise someone to kind of react if they feel like they're being disrespected, but they might not be
mhm,
like a VP, or what if they're
mhm.
starting off in their career or
Yeah.
individual contributor?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Lan, here's what I tell everyone. Everyone has power. I mean, every single person here and anyone that I talk to, I say to them that you have power. It's important that you understand what your power is in the organization. And I tell people that, sometimes it just starts out with having that conversation as that individual contributor, or, you're right. I was definitely in a position of power. But believe it or not, she was really in a position of power because she was an administrative assistant. And for any of you that work in environments, you know that the administrator or the administrative assistant is often the gatekeeper. I
Hmm.
don't care. So they can stop you, not let you. So they have what I call informal power. So it's really, it can be a career limiting move for you if you don't have the assistant like on your side, because she stops a lot of things from happening. So it's sometimes not about position in terms of title. It is about what you do in the organization that wills you. So that's like an informal power. But I'll submit to you, sometimes that's more powerful than the formal power, because sometimes you will meet someone, and I'm sure many of you have worked with individuals that have big titles, and like their wallpaper. No one respects them, no one knows them. They know them, but they just know them by name. But they'll go and talk to Joe down the hallway who doesn't have the big title, but when he says something, people move out. Okay, so you have to be careful of that and pay attention to that. But for those of you and those individuals, Land, that you mentioned that don't have that formal power, because I had formal power at that moment. I've said to individuals, you have power, find out what that power is. Ask individuals in your organization, like, how are you perceived? That's a huge thing. I walked around in organizations and I said, so tell me, what's the hallway conversation about me? Like, what do people think about me? And that told me a lot because it told me like people are like, you're a go-getter, Francine, you take care of things. You know, you clearly have a voice with this person. So I start clocking all that in my head. And that's how I started to build my power because I'm like, oh, people view me as a person who does X, Y, and Z. Aha, oh, people view this. So you start building that block in your head, in your mind around what you and what the organization perceives you to be. And if they don't perceive you the way that you want to be perceived, you have an opportunity to change it. I mean, I talk to so many people that talk to me and they're like, I don't know what my boss thinks of me except, my performance. I'm like, well, have you ever sat down and had a conversation, not only with him, but with others? So if you are in a position where you are not in that formal power structure, you have the opportunity to even pull that person aside later on. And I've done that before. I said, hey, let me talk to you a little bit. Can I have a conversation with you a minute? I was in this meeting with you and I kind of didn't understand what you meant by this. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about intent versus impact. I know you didn't intend to do this, but let me tell you how it landed on me when I listened to you. Okay. And so tell me if I'm right. Tell me if I misunderstood you. So I always give people a way out. I never come in an accusatory fashion, but I'm very clear to let you know where I stand. And that's your power to own when you let people know where you stand, but you can do it in a very diplomatic way. You don't, it's once again that continuum that you have. You definitely have that within your control. Does that answer your question, Lan?
It totally does. And I've never heard anyone articulate it like that, but I think it's a really like, the whole hidden power, right? And I think you talk about that in your book, that all of us, no matter what our title, have these kind of hidden powers, um, hiding in plain sight, and we just have to access it, right? I think that's super powerful. And from experience too, I used to be the top salesperson at my this company that I used to work for, and the reason why was I was very friendly with all of the EAs of the C-suite executives that I was trying to outreach. So while you had some other folks in the sales team who were like, how did you get that meeting with that CMO or that CEO? And I was like, I traded memes and cat pictures with the with the EA. And that's only because I have this philosophy of treating everyone with kindness. So it wasn't that I was trying to get in good with the EA so I could connect with the executive. It's just that's how I treat everyone with respect. And because the EAs weren't used to uh other executives treating them that way, because I understood their hidden power and I treated them with kindness, I always was able to get a meeting with the decision maker, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of an example of like the hidden power. And but the story that you told about sit over there, wow. I mean, I think all of us are I kind of our hearts dropped because I think we all could relate to it at some point. I know for me in my career, I was managing a huge team and I walked in with, one of my direct reports and he's like 6 feet tall. I'm 5'2". And as soon as I walk in, because we're supposed to present to this big spirits company, major one of the biggest ones. And as soon as I walked in, everyone looked at, my direct port, who was 6 foot tall, and just said, assumed that he was, the senior leader in the group. And then, when they did that, he was just like, nope, that's my boss. And he pointed out to me. Right. But there's always this assumption, whether it's height, sometimes there's a height issue, sometimes it's race, sometimes it's your gender. There's so many different factors that kind of come into play. But I love your example of doing it gracefully because I think that has such a bigger impact, right? And I love what you said about giving them an not an exit, but what is that? What is the word you said?
I said giving them like an out, if you will, or
Yes,
yeah, giving them an out.
giving them an out is, I
Mhm.
think, is powerful because sometimes it's ignorance, but sometimes it's just kind of like making a mistake. And when you give them an out, it's like, okay, you made a mistake with this. It's okay. And it allows them to be able to kind of respond and not feel like, okay, I'm, um, it doesn't ruin the relationship,
Sure.
in the long run. So let's talk about your book talks about strategic relationships as well. What advice do you have for building strategic relationships in the workplace? You kind of mentioned earlier about, your hidden power, and then though you might not have a senior title, you might have all of these different relationships, or maybe you're the fixer, or you're the person, even though you might not have the title, that people come to you when they are trying to figure out, a problem or get things done. How can these relationships help shift the power dynamics in one's favor?
Sure. I mean, I tell, even though sometimes we get caught up in the day-to-day tasks, because we all do, our leaders, our managers, or whomever, even we as individual contributors, to other, where we, help other individuals or feed into their goals and objectives or whatever the case may be. We all have to take time to set aside the opportunity to nurture those relationships, right? And so at the end, I started out and I kept doing this every time, I would begin a new job. I had something I wanted to share, whatever the case may be, is that I made sure that I had the right conversations with the right people and the organizations that I worked for. And that didn't mean that I was just focused on, the top echelon of the organization. Sometimes, to your point, Lan, it was that person who could get me, could help me in IT,
Mhm.
sometimes, and sometimes it was as simple as going to lunch. Sometimes I worked late and I would see like a colleague of mine coming over and I'm like, hey, I'm going to be eating some popcorn. You want to have some? Or sometimes I would take it over to them. And I know right now we live in a very different world because look at what we're doing today. We're using technology, but that doesn't stop you from having those still having those conversations. I mean, listen, grab your lunch and get on a Zoom call. Like Zoom's free in your company, hopefully, or Microsoft Teams or whatever. Get on a call and just say, hey, just wanted to check in with you to see how you were doing, or just want to share with you some work I'm doing, and what advice would you give me, or hey, I heard something really good about you, I wanted to share that with you. You would be surprised that we spend so much time on this place called technology, and it's always an exchange. Like it's like, okay, we're going to have this team meeting and we're going to all do it on Zoom and we're going to exchange a bunch of stuff. Have you ever just had a conversation to have a conversation? And though it is a thoughtful conversation, and if you have some goals or some objectives or something you want to accomplish or you want to get feedback on, it's the perfect time to ask. And I was very strategic about that when I worked for one company that was very much built on, let's get the work done. No harm, no foul. We can disagree, but we're going to get the work done. I came into another company that I worked for where it was all about relationships. And that's how you got work done. Like the company made money in spite of themselves. They were very good with relationships. And so very relational organization. And I had to learn that because I came from an organization that was very like task focused. It was like you're going in and you're, taking over the hill, if you will. And so I had to switch my gears on that, but I'm glad that I had both experiences because I really learned to deliver, right? Because it is all about what you deliver and on your job. But I also learned that it was about working those relationships and thinking very in purposefully about them. So it's not just everyone, you're just, but you want to think through who are the people that I get my job done through, who are the people that can help me move my agenda ahead, who are the people that can help promote me or help say something about me when I'm not in the room to be, to raise my hand and speak for myself. So you have to, really think about like, what are your goals, right? Your goals are always to, bottom line is, it's always to do a good job and to achieve and, to make sure you do your, whatever tasks you've been given or whatever your goals and objectives are, you want to do those exceptionally well. Like that's table stakes. I tell anyone, if you're not doing a good job, like don't focus on the relationships, because you get known in a different way. What you want to do is do your job exceptionally well. And you want people that that are in the room that may have the power to talk about you. you may just want to connect with them and say, you know what, I know you meet and you talk about other people. Let me share with you a little bit of my lens and what I do. And I just want to let you know that, do you mind if I have lunch with you, or you mind if I connect with you for 10 minutes over Zoom, or whatever the case may be, or when you're in the office and I'm in the office on the same day if we work this hybrid schedule. But what I say to individuals is that this is work. Okay, first and foremost, this is work. I did not get to the level that I got in corporate America just because I did a good job. Doing a good job was a given. Now, the other stuff on top of it was what got me to the next level and the next level and the next level. And I was very intentional about my career. And I tell everyone it's hard work. Like, it doesn't, anyone that will say to you, you ask someone, well, how did you get promoted? And they're like, I was just in the right place at the right time. They're not telling you the truth. Either they're not paying attention to how they got there, or they just don't want to tell you. But I submit to everyone, on this Zoom call here, is that careers are intentional. It's about what you want to do with them and what work you want to put into them. And if you're at a company that they are not acknowledging you for your work, then you need to think about what you want to do. And it may not be with that company. It's that simple. But it's a lot behind that.
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny because I had posted probably not too long ago that we make networking and building professional relationships so complicated, but what it comes down to is just be a good person, be
Yeah.
kind to people. I think
Mhm.
what you added is very important, which is you also need to be competent, because and that's rare these days, competency and kindness in the workforce, right? You might get one or the other, right? But
Mhm.
the ability to do your job and do it well, but also to be kind and to be able to build trust and collaborate. Um, and I think also kind of the missing piece is helping other people become better. Because when you can become a force multiplier, that's real leadership,
Mhm.
right? You have the competency, you have the emotional intelligence, but you also have the ability to amplify and make other people around you better, whether it's through mentoring, sponsoring, training, all of these other things. So I think that's a really kind of a powerful point that you
Yeah.
made.
No,
Um,
and you're right, Lan. I mean, that is very important because that goes back to that question I asked earlier when I said, you need to decide what you want to be known for. Now you can say, I want to be known as a developer of talent. Like, I spent a great deal of my career knowing that, I wanted people to know that I knew how to develop people. I knew how to promote people. I knew how to develop them. I knew how to do all of that. And that became my hallway, like, I guess sign on my head when I walked down the hallway. That became what I was known for in the organization. So when I went out and I had an open position, I had no problem filling that
yeah,
job.
yeah,
And not only did they know that about me, they saw my results, right? In addition to my work, they saw my results. And so they're like, oh, I want to come work for Francine because Francine works on getting you promoted. Right.
mm,
So those, but that was delivery. That was delivery, above my job, obviously, but part of my job, not just above it. But that's what you have to ask yourself, what do you want to become known for in your organization? And then you sort of build everything around that to support that so that it becomes natural that people think of you in that manner.
yeah. And I think also strategically, um, picking what you put your time into. Like I have a lot of conversations with women where we are doing a lot of the like extracurricular kind of social activities. Oh, who's going to take the notes? And when you're initially the giver of the group, you want to volunteer for everything and you want to be helpful. But taking notes is not going to get you a promotion, right? Presenting the deck, doing the things, because I have so many conversations with actually very senior leaders who are like SVPs, EVPs, VPs, who are still doing the decks for the CEO or their boss, whoever their boss is. So let's say they're a director and they're doing all of the work, the presentations, the deck, while the senior leader, more senior than them, presents it to them. I have so many experiences in my career, where that has been the case, right? And so really being able to kind of pick and choose like, where well, let me put that as an example because I think a lot of people, and tell me in the comments if those who are on live stream or uh on the Zoom audience, if that has ever happened to you where someone has taken credit for your work. Let me know in the chat if that has happened to you before. What do you do in that case, Francine, where you're doing the work and other people are taking credit for your work? And I'm seeing a lot of yes all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've had I worked for a leader that did that a lot to me. And and it was like she thanked me profusely behind the scenes. She's like, "Oh my God, this was great, Francine. Thank you, thank you, thank you." But I was like, "Well, wait a minute. Like, should I
Maybe he
put my
doesn't get a promotion.
Exactly. Should I like in the deck that I'm putting together, should I like embed my name? You know how you can embed your name so
Yeah,
that it pops up, like nobody sees it except when it pops up. I'm like, should I do that or what? But what I told her is I thanked her once again and said, I really appreciate your acknowledgement. And she not only thanked me, she thanked me in other ways, like, in terms of my bonuses, in terms of more pay. So she was that type of person, but she wanted the organization to see her in the front. And
yeah.
so, the conversation that, I had with her is I said, would you mind, sometimes if I present it like this little tiny portion, like I'm in the room sometimes, or would you mind like just saying thank you to the team and like thanking me, so that others know the work that I'm doing as well. I support you. Because see, here's the thing that I learned, Lan, is that if you never ask and if you don't speak up, and if you go off and tell your friends or you bring it home, and I used to tell my husband, I'm like, can you believe they did this to me or whatever? But if you don't go back, and it takes courage, trust me, it takes a lot of courage, it takes grace, it takes savviness, etc. But if you only let that rest with you and people that you want to share that with that can't help you, see, you can talk to 15 different people, but they can't help your situation. I just look at that as therapy. Like I see that, I'm like, okay, you're talking to them, they're listening to you, they're nodding their heads, but they don't have that power to be able to do something. And so if you have a relationship, and I did this with this person, I hinted to them, and then I started looking at who was this person presenting to. And some of the people that this person was presenting to were actually individuals that I also reported into. So, in certain structures, you have like that solid line and you have the dotted line, you have 15 other people you report into. And I started going to those other people that I indirectly reported into and just said, hey, you know what? And they'll say, that was such a great presentation. I'm like, yeah, it really was. I'm so glad that I was able to contribute. And they're like, oh, well, what did you do? And I'm like, well, I provided, the deck that had the numbers on it, or, I'd say something like, wow, didn't those numbers like amaze you? And they're like, yeah, those were amazing numbers. I'm like, when I was doing my research, see, I told them, okay, I didn't come out and say I was given that task, but there is a way. And, the biggest thing that I talk to individuals about, and we have conversations about, is really how you communicate. How do you communicate? How do you lend your voice? How do you unlearn the silence, as Elaine talks about? How do you really make that a part, as you talk about, Lan, in your book about your daily routine, right? How do those things start to become who you are, right? In terms of, and I'm not telling you to change your personality or anything like that, but I'm telling you, how do you become that person that is sensitive to that and acutely aware of it if it is important to you? Right. So those are things, and those are like learned muscles. It's like you do that over and over again and you become aware of that. But there are ways to let the organization and those individuals know that you're doing this work. And it doesn't have to be directly to your manager. I've been fortunate enough to have people that came back to me and said, hey, I knew you did this great job. And I mentioned that in the meeting. I'm like, oh, yay, I achieved my goal, right? Doesn't always have to be your boss singing your praises. I'll tell you that the most important people in my career that sung my praises were not necessarily my leader. It was everybody else. And that was telling within itself. That's for another story, another time.
But that's
Yeah.
also about you building those relationships and
Mhm.
those connections. So it's all kind of intertwined,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, so Gigi in the comments says once you get identified as a note taker, it becomes hard to shed that label. I completely agree.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I just tell people I have really bad handwriting. I can't I can't take the notes.
Yeah.
It's kind of like cooking. Like I
Mhm.
have not tried to be a good cook because I'm like, why? When my husband's a good cook, and if got good at cooking, then I'd have to cook. So
Mhm.
just don't take the notes.
Right. Or, or you can actually, before the meeting, right? So if you're the person, if you got the person that's always identifying you as the note taker, you don't have to like I'm very cautious, especially as I continue to go further into my career and I worked with very senior leaders such as yourself, Lan,
Yeah.
is that I had a cardinal rule. And the cardinal rule for me was never embarrass your leader. Never
Yes.
because you get
Yes.
nothing out of doing that.
Yes.
Like everybody else will be doing the applause underneath the table. They're like, yeah, she told that guy off. He's such a jerk. But see, none of them will come to your defense.
No.
Okay, when you're doing that. So you become the
Words of wisdom right here.
okay, you become the roadkill. Okay, you really do. You become like the conference room roadkill, and that leader will come after you. And I've seen it. And not only do they publicly come after you, they come after you behind the scenes, right? And so you have to be careful because you don't know who they're talking to because you're not with them all the time. But there is a way back to that whole grace and being savvy about it. There's
Yeah.
a way to say, to the person that always designates you to do the note taking, hey, do you mind? I'd like if could someone else take the notes here? I think that, can we set some parameters around that or whatever the case may be? And I think that you can have that conversation, but it doesn't have to be in public. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be in, or you can go to other people and say, hey, would you mind taking the notes for me? I'm not that good. Or you can do what I've done before is I just started leaving my notebook in the room. I left it at my desk.
Genius.
Yeah, you start doing those type things. And more importantly, you start, you say, hey, I just capture high level because
Yeah.
I've seen people, they capture all the detail. And I used to be that detail and people love it because they can, and they don't really read your notes. They only read like the top line. Let's be clear on that. When they read the first one or two sentences and
Yeah.
you've got taken it back to your office, you looked it over, you spell checked it,
Yeah.
and they read like two sentences.
Exactly. Francine, it's almost time's up, but do you have time to stay for 5, 6 more minutes, or do you have a hard stop?
No, no, I'm
Okay,
available.
we're gonna go maybe a little bit over just because I want to make sure we answer everyone's kind of question. So maybe
Sure.
we'll go over by 5, 10 minutes.
Mhm.
Um, but we have a question in the comments.
Mhm.
So the question is, how do we know if the person is giving us authentic feedback about how others view us? So let's say you're kind of asking for feedback. How do we know that it's authentic feedback?
You know that it's authentic feedback because you ask more than one person.
Mm,
And so that's how you know that. And then you kind of pull it all together and you say, oh, this is what they're saying. And then you can go back if you want to, and you can validate that. So, I use that one sentence. So, what's the hallway conversation on me? I'm really asking you, and I'm not asking you to tell me like this is what I think. And they probably are telling you what they think, but you're giving them, what's the word out there about me? And they're like, well, people, and it's really them. Okay, don't go down that dark. I tell people don't go down the dark alley without the flashlight because you're like, is that really you? And it's like, you get nothing out of that one. It's like, thank you for sharing that information. And you keep that, but you ask, many people, and then you can spend some time going back to those people and saying, hey, you know what? Here's what I heard. Here's what people are saying. Would you say that's accurate? And if it's something you don't want to have, then or you don't think it's accurate or whatever, you have an opportunity to change that. See, the biggest thing is you knowing something and not saying anything about it and just saying, well, you know what, this is the way I'm viewed, and that's just the way it is. I fundamentally believe we all have an opportunity to change people's views about us if we are intentional about it.
yeah, I love that. Does anyone have any questions? You could either just unmute and ask your question, or you can just let me know in the comments. I'll wait a second. If not, I will ask the questions. Also, if anyone's watching this via live stream, you could just kind of put your question in the comments as well. Okay, so let me ask you this question. If anyone has any questions, just put it in the comments. So you talk about, like systemic barriers, and the conversation we had was on all of these different authors. I will say for me, it was Lean In, where I could not relate to any of that content, or even these notion of imposter syndrome. I don't think I've ever had imposter syndrome because I always knew I was capable, but I was never not always given the opportunity to lead, to speak, to present, to do all of these different things. I had to fight and claw my way to get any form of recognition. It wasn't a matter of imposter syndrome. It was a matter of people believing that I had leadership capability, right? And it wasn't until my numbers were twice as much as everyone else, and I had to basically do everything exceedingly well before I could even think of getting a promotion. So all of this notion and tips that were in Lean In don't really apply when you are, in my opinion, a woman of color, someone who has disability, someone who's different in any way, right? LGBTQ, whatnot. So from your experience, coming as a Black woman, what are some of the most persistent systemic barriers that Black women face in the workforce today? And what practical steps can be taken to overcome them? Because I think that would be very helpful for the folks who are kind of listening to this right now.
I think that I tell this story, and it's actually in my book again, where I tell the story and I give the analogy of two individuals, across, they're standing on the corner, and one is me, right? And then there's another person who is the opposite of me, right? Another gender, another race, whatever the case may be. And we both come across the street. And I say this specifically when I'm talking to individuals. Well, I say that pretty much anyone. I mean, the audience doesn't matter. But I talk about the fact that me, once again, because I can't, I'm not Lan, I'm not an Asian woman, so I cannot speak to your experience. I can only honor your experience, right? But I say to myself, I tell them is that I'm walking across the street. I said the challenge that I often face as a Black woman in any environment is sometimes the story is already written about me.
Mm.
Whereas, so I get to cross the street and the story has already been written about me. So when I get across the street, I've got to unravel all the things that people believe about me as a Black woman in the workplace. Okay. Whereas others, and sometimes I'll say majority, individuals, their story is not as tough to unravel because the people that they're speaking to are like them. Okay, so certain courtesies, certain things, certain thoughts are given to them automatically that would not be given to me. Okay, so that's what the challenge is at times that you have to be very aware of and you have to be very cognizant of. And that's reality. I mean, but here's what I tell people is that I work to maintain staying in the room to change the room. So for me, this is not about me getting a seat at the table, all the analogies that are sometimes, used or phrases that are used, I should say. It's not just about that. It's about changing the room to make it better for all, right? So I tell women, especially, women of color, women like me, I say, listen, when I put my leg in, you put your leg in, I put my hip in, you put your hip in, we put our shoulder in, you put your shoulder in, and before you know it, we have changed the room. That's when you know that you have done something that is impactful, when you can change the room. Because see, the advice to your point, Lan, the lean in advice, no, that didn't apply to me. I'm like, I don't have the infrastructure, I don't have the support systems that are written about in this book to succeed. This goes back to the earlier comment about, business books. So my book sits in the business genre. When you look at who go into the library and you look at how many diverse authors, how many Elaine Lynn Herrings, how many Lands, how many Francines, that you see in that library or you see at Barnes and Noble, wherever, just do a survey, right? And so we have been reading those business books and saying that that's how we should do it when it's actually the opposite at times of what we should be doing because the advice is being written from the lens, once again, of someone who has never experienced what I have experienced. Okay, but it's supposed to be sort of broad and all that good stuff. And guess what? Sometimes it doesn't work. Like, the lean in stuff just don't work for some of us. So you have to take, but here's what I would say, because I'll get that same feedback. Well, people will say, well, why would I read a book, written by a Black woman? How is that going to mean? Because I'm not a Black woman. And I say to them, what you have to do is there was something key that Sheryl Sandberg talked about in Lean In that you could use. There was something that, Adam Grant talked about in his book, Givers and Takers, that I could glean from. And I'm not saying, that he wrote a book just for a specific, demographic. I'm just saying that what you have to do is you have to look at every book that you read, especially when you're reading books, for careers and things like that. And you have to say, irrespective of who wrote the book, what is it that I can take away from it and make it my own? Right. And what can I do? So those are the things that I think a lot about. And I think a lot about around how do we shift the paradigm? How do we shift the room? Because I'm not just about advancing alone, and I'm not just about advancing individuals alone. I'm trying to advance us as a collective because I truly believe in this democratization of professional development.
So let's
Everyone should
talk,
have that opportunity.
since you're talking about books, and I've always encouraged my listeners and the people who kind of follow me on LinkedIn and stuff to elevate their voices, that everyone has a book in them. And so when I saw your conference behind the book, I was just really empowering other voices, right? People who've traditionally not been published, right? So tell us more about this conference and for anyone who might be on this call that might have a book in them, tell us about this event.
Well, I didn't think that I had a book in me. Really. I had my business was in full swing. I want to say about 5 or 6 years at the time before, and someone came to me and they're like, I do professional development. So I go into companies and I speak to a certain group, individuals that the organization deems to be, that they need to have professional development or I can enhance their career. My team and I can enhance their career. So sometimes those are like a small percentage in the organization. They're not everyone. And I don't control that. They hire me, I do what I'm, asked to do, if you will. So someone came to me and we were just having this conversation and they said, well, what about the other 80 or 90% of the individuals who don't have the privilege, if you will, to get the insights that you talk about, your stories, etc. And they said, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I was like, no, not really. I got a thriving business. I'm not really interested in book writing, even though I have a degree in journalism. Like, I'm not willing to go down that dark path. And they said, well, what are you going to do about the 80%? And I said, oh, right. So I started really thinking about that. And I said, well, for $20, if I can give insight to truly helping others that may not be in that room, read a book, take a couple weeks and read it, and it's going to help them, I'm all in it. So that's why I wrote the book. That's how the book came about. Not in the reverse. Most people have a book and then they develop a business. I did the opposite. But more importantly, when I started to go through this process of book writing, it's no different than when I started to go through the process of, you know, earning my way through corporate America. I discovered that there were barriers. I discovered that there were things that people didn't know. And I discovered that there was actually an opportunity, and I felt that they should know. And I felt that also there were, individuals that were not represented. Their voices were not represented in this genre, in the publishing industry. And when you talk about the business side of books, even less, right? And so I said, my goodness, that's interesting. And I had my business hat on. So I'm asking a lot of business questions. I'm like, I'll write the book, but I'm very curious about how the business works. Just like I was in, when I was in corporate America, I wanted to know how the business worked because that's how you really earn your money, earn your keep, all the good stuff that you do if you understand the business. And so I just started asking a lot of questions and I didn't get answers. And I said, wow, how many other people are not getting answers?
Hmm.
And how many other people need to understand the business before you write the book? Understand the business of the book, understand the business of publishing so that you can ask the intelligent questions about your margins, about how many books are expected of you, who should be, who should be helping you with your rights, all the things that you should be asking because the industry sometimes talks to you about the creative side. They don't talk to you about the business side. So me being the person that I am, I'm like, you know what? I think that there are people out there that need to know this, not just me, right? I'm always sharing. So that's how the business behind the book came about, because I talked to my editor a lot and I said, does anybody talk about the business behind the book? Like there's a whole business, but we're focused on the creative side only. And I think that that's a disservice because we are really talking about, in my mind, it really comes down to, and not just you knowing how it works, but it really comes down to it comes down to your financial inclusion. It comes down to your economic empowerment. That's what we're really talking about. It's not just writing a great book and having a bunch of people, buy it and you become a bestseller. I always think about, just like I talk to women in the corporate spaces where I did my training and development, I'm like, why are you getting promoted? You're getting promoted just not to be getting promoted. You want to have a better lifestyle. You want to make more money. You want it on and on and on. Why should you treat a book any different? So I'm very much on the path of empowerment from an economic perspective and financial inclusion and all of that. That's the foundation of why I do the work I do.
I love
So
that.
hence the conference, hence the
Awesome.
conference, bringing the experts in to be able to help us to understand. So this isn't just a collective of authors that are coming together to share our books. I'm bringing industry experts that will tell you how to make sure your book is successful.
And before we close up, can you send that or give us the detail when it is, where, what website we can find this
Sure.
conference?
Yeah, so the event is next week. I wish it was 2 weeks away, Lan.
Oh, sorry. I
It's
lose
next
track of time.
week.
All the days kind of are a blur for me. Sorry.
No, no, no problem. No worries at all. It's April 23rd through the 25th. It's in New York City. It's 3 full days. We start, so Lan, we're going to work hard because you're going to be
Yes.
there. We're going to
Oh, I'll
close
I'll be
hard.
speaking, so please
Yes.
come.
Yes, please come. So April 23rd through the 25th, in New York City in Midtown Manhattan is where we're going to be. And it's going to be amazing. We have over 30, I think we have about 32 modules we're doing, 2 workshops. I mean, I just said I'm going to put my foot into this one because I really, really believe that this is important. And where you can find this is that you can go on to thebusinessbehindthebook.co. So not .com, .co. So the business behind the book. I know it's a long word, but the business behind the book.co.
And I'll make sure I'll add them on the
Hmm.
LinkedIn stream and the comments
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Um,
And please reach out to me. I mean, and I am active in LinkedIn. So I spend a lot of time there. So if you're interested, as Lan said, there may be something in store for you.
Thank you. Oh, Dr. Avila posted it. Thank you. Yes, and make sure you follow Francine as well on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, everyone who joined us today. What's one thing you want the folks who are on this call or watching via live stream to take away from this call? The one thing.
Wow, that's a lot, Lan, because I talk a lot. But here's the one thing. Here's what I would say is don't give up on your career.
Mm,
Don't give up on your career. You've probably taken a lot of time. You probably invested a lot in your career. Please don't give up on your career.
I love that. I love that. So folks who are on the call, I know all of you have your video cameras off, probably because you're in your PJs or whatnot. If you feel comfortable, turn on your video cameras because Francine deserves a round of applause. Woo! Francine, thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Thank you so much for everyone who joined. Sorry for the
I have
technical
a question,
difficulties.
Lan.
Oh, sure, questions. Yes.
Hey, Francine, thank you very much for everything that you just did. I just got on the site, and considering that this is just brand new for me, probably for everyone on the call, I didn't even know about it. Is there any opportunity? Because we're late now as far as registration. Like if we wanted to attend, we're considered a late registration, and
It's
it's
gone up.
Yeah. Do
Yeah,
you have
yeah.
any discounts for us, Francine, or anything? Or friends?
Yeah, yeah. No, oh, so here's the secret. I have not shut the, I'm not, oh, I'm on a glove. I might as well tell everyone. So I opened it back up. So I do have the dates on there, like when I shut it down, but I opened it back up. So if you are interested, okay, if you're interested, I want you to send me an email. I'm at email@francineparham.com. Like send me one because I'm rolling up numbers and doing that stuff today. I will do my best to work with you. I have the beauty of it all, Lan, I didn't have a chance to
Hmm.
tell you is that some individuals, this is the power of the network. my network. So some individuals have come forward and they have offered like partial scholarships, have offered scholarships, have done a lot of different things. I'm talking about some powerful women have come forward in a very creative way. They said, I can't attend,
Amen.
but I want to get behind you. So I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to know, send me email at francineparham.com. I'm the one, oh, someone's in the camera here. I have the ability to do some hey there, hi. I have the ability to help you and to help. I have the ability to help you. And the one thing is that the people that have raised their hand to do this anonymously, and they are amazing, amazing women and men, is that they've said to me, Francine, we want to help, but we want to know that the individuals that are going to be a part of this, they also have some skin in the game. And I'll tell you about what that means. So I believe in people contributing. And we can talk about what that means, but I'm gonna tell you, send me an email at francineparham.com. That's my business email. I pay a lot of attention to that. And if you want to come, you're not late. You're just in
And if you
time.
look at the agenda, it's amazing. Like literally, I had spent 4 years kind of not just writing my book, but doing research, trying to understand. And I wish I had this conference. And so that's why I reached out to Francine. I was like, this is going to help so many people. How can I be involved? And so I was like, I want to speak because I want to share my story of the horror stories I went through.
Yes. Yes.
So
hmm
awesome. So email
Yeah.
at francineparham dot
Yes.
com.
Yes. And
Yes,
I see someone's asked, are there any digital or Zoom options for the conference? Not this time around. We're going to think about that maybe next year, but this is our inaugural one. But I tell you guys, Land knows I have not slept. I have not slept. I am on like this, like, when you plan something, you're like on this high,
yeah.
and like after this is over with, I'll probably crash. But I'm very committed to this work. Because this is, I consider being an author a career. I really do. This isn't like a side hustle. This isn't like something you kind of do because it is hard, hard work. So if you're interested, do like join, let me know, and like we'll figure this out. Okay?
Love
I
that. And
promise you.
I'm going to leave it with this quote. If your why is strong enough, you will figure out your how. And you've done that,
Absolutely.
Francine.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Amen. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you on the next Let's Talk. Okay. I didn't actually hit her.